goes. All right, now you can go.
What do I do a laptop baby? Top on it and then the ballot. The ballot? And then the clean the whole laptop baby. In the laptop baby, in the top on it, and the ballot, and the clean the whole laptop baby. And the penny, and the ballot, and the clean.
Very good. Welcome to the MasterMind Library. I am. They call me Ferdinand, the bringer of balance, leader of many disciplines, and one of your hosts of the MasterMind Library, the home of the MasterMind Book Club on FHCII.com. You doing all right there? You might need some tea. You might have to make some tea after the MasterMind Library. Some tea sound good?
Yeah. I love tea.
You love tea?
With
honey? Okay, all right. So today on episode 141, we are on the next book in the MasterMind Library, which is Secrets of the Federal Reserve. All right. So today we're going to read the preface and we're going to read the introduction. And this book is by Eustace, but hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, Eustace Phillips. All right. So let's move to where we need to be. Eustace Mullins. Eustace Mullins is the author of Secrets of the Federal Reserve. All right, we got our acknowledgments. Let's go on to our preface, our foreword. I'm gonna have to change that in the write-up. Yes, so our foreword. In 1949, while I was visiting Ezra Pound, matter of fact, let's make this a little bit larger for everybody first. It's kind of small. Then we'll come back to it. That's a little bit better. Let's go even bigger than that. All right, let's try that. That's a little bit better, Trey? Yeah, it's easier for everybody to read? Okay. In 1949, while I was visiting Ezra Pound, who was a political prisoner at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Washington, D.C., a federal institution for the insane, Dr. Pound asked me if I had ever heard of the Federal Reserve System. I replied that I had not, as of the age of 25. He then showed me a $10 bill marked Federal Reserve Note and asked me if I would do some research at the Library of Congress on the Federal Reserve System, which had issued this bill. Pound was unable to go to the library himself as he was being held without trial as a political prisoner by the United States government. After he was denied broadcasting time in the U.S., Dr. Pound broadcasts from Italy in an effort to persuade people of the United States not to enter World War II. Franklin D. Roosevelt had personally ordered Pound's indictment, spurred by the demands of his three personal assistants, Harry Dexter White, Lachlan Curry, and Alger Hiss, all of whom were subsequently identified as being connected with communist espionage. I had no interest in money or banking as a subject because I was working on a novel. Pound offered to supplement my income by $10 a week for a few weeks. My initial research revealed evidence of an international banking group which had secretly planned the writing of the Federal Reserve Act and Congress enactment of the plan into law. These findings confirmed what Pound had long suspected. He said, "You must work on it as a detective story." I was fortunate in having my research at the Library of Congress directed by a prominent scholar, George Simpson, founder of the National Press Club, who was described by the New York Times of September 28, 1952, beloved by Washington newspapersmen as our walking Library of Congress. Mr. Simpson was a highly regarded reference source in the Capitol. Government officials, congressmen, and reporters went to him for information on any subject. I did research 4 hours each day at the Library of Congress and went to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in the afternoon. Pound and I went over the previous day's notes. I then had dinner with George Stimson at Scholl's cafeteria while he went over my material, and I then went back to my room to type up the corrected notes. Both Stimson and Pound made many suggestions in guiding me in a field in which I had no previous experience. When Pound's resources ran low, I applied to the Guggenheim Foundation, Huntington Hartford Foundation, and other foundations to complete my research on the Federal Reserve. Even though my foundation of applications were sponsored by the three leading poets of America, Ezra Pound, E. Cummings, and Elizabeth Bishop, all of the foundations refused to sponsor this research. Hold on one second, y'all. This is my wife texting me. Let's make sure everything is going good. I'm going to do the chain. Okay. All right, I think we're good. All of the foundations refused to sponsor this research. I then wrote up my findings to date, and in 1950 began efforts to market this manuscript in New York. 18 publishers turned it down without comment, but the 19th, Devin Garrity, president of Devin Adair Publishing Company, gave me some friendly advice in his office. I like your book, but we can't print it, he told me. Neither can anybody else in New York. Why don't you bring in a prospectus for your novel? And I think we can give you an advance. You may as well forget about getting the Federal Reserve book published. I doubt if it could ever be printed. This was devastating news coming after 2 years of intensive work. I reported back to Pound, and we tried to find a publisher in other parts of the country. After 2 years of fruitless submissions, the book was published in a small edition in 1952 by two of Pound's disciples, John Casper and David Horton, using their private funds, under the title Mullins on the Federal Reserve. In 1954, a second edition with unauthorized alterations was published in New Jersey as the Federal Reserve Conspiracy. In 1955, Guido Roeder brought out a German edition in Obermargu, Germany. The book was seized and the entire edition of 10,000 copies burned by government agents led by Dr. Otto John. The burning of the book was upheld April 21st, 1961 by Judge Israel Katz of the Bavarian Supreme Court. The U.S. government refused to intervene because U.S. High Commissioner to Germany, James B. Conant, president of Harvard University 1933 to 1953, had approved the initial book burning order. This is the only book which has been burned in Germany since World War II. In 1968, a pirated edition of this book appeared in California. Both the FBI and the U.S. Postal Inspectors refused to act, despite numerous complaints from me during the next decade. In 1980, a new German edition appeared. Because the U.S. government apparently no longer dictated the internal affairs of Germany, the identical book, which had been burned in 1955, now circulates in Germany without interference. I had collaborated on several books with Mr. H. L. Hunt, and he suggested that I should continue my long-delayed research on the Federal Reserve and bring out a more definitive version of this book. I had just signed a contract to write the authorized biography of Ezra Pound, and the Federal Reserve book had to be postponed. Mr. Hunt passed away before I could get back to my research, and once again I faced the problem of financing research for the book. My original book had traced and named the shadowy figures in the United States who planned the Federal Reserve Act. I now discovered that the men whom I exposed in 1952 as the shadowy figures behind the operation of the Federal Reserve System were themselves shadows, the American fronts for the unknown figures who became known as the London Connection. I found that notwithstanding our successes in the wars of independence of 1812 against England, We remained an economic and financial colony of Great Britain. For the first time, we located the original stockholders of the Federal Reserve banks and traced their parent companies to the London connection. This research is substantiated by citations and documentation from hundreds of newspapers, periodicals, and books and charts showing blood, marriage, and business relationships. More than 1,000 issues of the New York Times on microfilm have been checked not only for original information, but verification of statements from other sources. It is a truism of the writing profession that a writer has only one book within him. This seems applicable in my case because I am now in the 5th decade of continuous writing on a single subject, the inside story of the Federal Reserve System. This book was from its inception commissioned and guided by Ezra Pound. 4 of his protégés have previously been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. William Butler Yeats for his later poetry, James Joyce for Ulysses, Ernest Hemingway for The Sun Also Rises, and T.S. Eliot for The Wasteland. Pound played a major role in the inspiration and in the editing of these works, which leads us to believe that this present work, also inspired by Pound, represents an ongoing literary tradition. Although this book in its inception was expected to be a tortuous work on economic and monetary techniques, it soon developed into a story of such universal and dramatic appeal that from the outset, Ezra Pound urged me to write it as a detective story, a genre which was invented by my fellow Virginian, Edgar Allan Poe. I believe that the continuous circulation of this book during the past 40 years has not only exonerated Ezra Pound for his much condemned political and monetary statements, but also that it has been, and will continue to be, the ultimate weapon against the powerful conspirators who compelled him to serve 13 and a half years without trial, as a political prisoner held in an insane asylum a la KGB. His earliest vindication came when the government agents who represented the conspirators refused to allow him to testify in his own defense. The second vindication came in 1958 when these same agents dropped all charges against him, and he walked out of St. Elizabeth's Hospital, a free man once more. His third and final vindication in this work, which documents every aspect of his exposure of the ruthless international financiers to whom Ezra Pound became but one more victim, doomed to serve years as the man in the iron mask, because he had dared to alert his fellow Americans to their furtive acts of treason against all people of the United States. In my lectures throughout this nation, and in my appearances on many radio and television programs, I have sounded the tocsin that the Federal Reserve System is not federal. It has no reserves, and it is not a system at all, but rather a criminal syndicate. From November 1910, when the conspirators met on Jekyll Island, Georgia, to the present time, the machinations of the Federal Reserve bankers have been shrouded in secrecy. Today, that secrecy has cost the American people a $3 trillion debt, with annual interest payments to these bankers amounting to some $300 billion per year, sums which stagger the imagination and which in themselves are ultimately unpayable. Officials of the Federal Reserve System routinely issue remonstrances to the public, much as the Hindu fakir pipes an insistent tune to the dazed cobra, which sways its head before him, not to resolve the situation, but to prevent it from striking him. Such was the soothing letter written by Donald J. Wynn, assistant to the Board of Governors, in response to an inquiry by a congressman, the Honorable Norman D. Shumway, on March 10, 1983. Mr. Wynn states that the Federal Reserve System was established by an act of Congress in 1913 and is not a private corporation. On the next page, Mr. Wynn continues, The stock of the Federal Reserve banks is held entirely by commercial banks that are members of the Federal Reserve System. He offers no explanation as to why the government has never owned a single share of stock in any Federal Reserve bank, or why the Federal Reserve System is not a private corporation when all of its stock is owned by private corporations. American history in the 12th century has recorded the amazing achievements of the Federal Reserve bankers. American history in the 20th century has recorded the amazing achievements of the Federal Reserve bankers. First, the outbreak of World War I, which was made possible by the funds available from the new Central Bank of the United States. Second, the agricultural depression of 1920. Third, the Black Friday crash on Wall Street of October 1929, and the ensuing Great Depression. Fourth, World War II. Fifth, the conversion of the assets of the United States and its citizens from real property to paper assets from 1945 to the present, transforming a victorious America and foremost world power in 1945 to the world's largest debtor nation in 1990. Today, this nation lies in economic ruins, devastated and destitute, in much the same dire straits in which Germany and Japan found themselves in 1945. Will Americans act to rebuild our nation as Germany and Japan have done when they faced the identical conditions which we now face? Or will we continue to be enslaved by the Babylonian debt money system, which was set up by the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 to complete our total destruction? This is the only question which we have to answer, and we do not have much time left to answer it. Because of the depth and the importance of the information which I had developed at the Library of Congress under the tutelage of Ezra Pound, this work became the happy hunting ground for many other would-be historians who were unable to research this material for themselves. Over the past 4 decades, I have become accustomed to seeing this material appear in many other books, invariably attributed to other writers, with my name never mentioned. To add insult to injury, not only my material, but even my title has been appropriated in a massive, if obtuse, work called Secrets of the Temple, the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve. This heavily advertised book received reviews ranging from incredulous to hilarious. Forbes magazine advises readers to read their review and save their money, pointing out that a reader will discover no secrets, and that this is one of those books whose fanfares far exceed their merit. This was not accidental, as this overblown whitewash of the Federal Reserve bankers was published by the most famous non-book publisher in the world. After my initial shock at discovering that the most influential literary personality of the 20th century, Ezra Pound, was imprisoned in the hellhole in Washington, I immediately wrote for assistance to a Wall Street financier at whose estate I had frequently been a guest. I reminded him that as a patron of the arts, he could not afford to allow Pound to remain in such inhumane capacity. His reply shocked me even more. He wrote back that your friend can well stay where he is. It was some years before I was able to understand that, for this investment banker and his colleagues, Ezra Pound would always be the enemy. Introduction. Hey, go close the door. Okay, go close the door. Okay, come right back. Close the door. Come on. Close the door. Come on. All right. Good job, buddy. Very good. Good job. All right. Introduction. Here are the simple facts of the great betrayal. Wilson and House knew that they were doing something momentous. One cannot fathom men's motives, and this pair probably believed in what they were up to. What they did not believe in was representative government. They believed in government by an uncontrolled oligarchy, whose acts would only become apparent after an interval so long that the electorate would be forever incapable of doing anything efficient to remedy depredations. Author's note. Dr. Pound wrote this introduction for the earliest version of this book, published by Casper and Horton, New York, 1952, because he was being held as a political prisoner without trial by the federal government. He could not afford to allow his name to appear on the book because of additional reprisals against him. Neither could he allow the book to be dedicated to him, although he had commissioned its writing. The author is gratified to be able to remedy these necessary omissions. 33 years after the events. Jefferson's opinion on the constitutionality of the bank. February 15th, 1791. The Writings of Thomas Jefferson, ed. by, Thomas Jefferson, Education, by H.E. Berg, Volume 3, page 145, ff. The bill for establishing a national bank in 1791 undertakes, among other things, 1, to form the subscribers into a corporation, 2, to enable them in their corporate capacities to receive grants of lands, and, so far, is against the laws of mortmain. 3, to make alien subscribers capable of holding lands, and so far is against the laws of alienage. 4, to transmit these lands on the death of a proprietor to a certain line of successors, and so far changes the course of descents. 5, to put the lands out of the reach of forfeiture or escheat, and so far is against the laws of forfeiture and escheat. 6, to transmit personal chattels to successors in a certain line, and so far is against the laws of distribution. 7, to give them the sole and exclusive right of banking under the national authority, and so far is against the laws of monopoly. 8, to communicate to them a power to make laws, paramount to the laws of the state, for so they must be construed to protect the institution from the control of the state legislatures, and so probably they will be construed. I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid on this ground, that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, or to the people, 12th Amendment. To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specially drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power, no longer susceptible of any definition. The incorporation of a bank and the powers assumed by this bill have not, in my opinion, been delegated to the United States by the Constitution. And that concludes our foreword and the introduction. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I wrote preface up there. It's my mistake. But on our next episode, we'll be coming into chapter 1 on Jekyll Island. What you got there, buddy? Huh?
I got it.
Yeah, what you got there?
I got the Hot Wheels.
Is that Beyblades?
No, Hot Wheels.
It looked like Beyblades, even though I know you think it's Hot Wheels, but it looked like Beyblades, like the one that you spin in the little arena, and then you have the Beyblade fights. That's what it looks like.
No, this is Hot Wheels.
Hot Wheel? Okay. Yeah. Does it spin really fast?
Uh-huh. What is the baby?
Yeah. One of these days, you'll get to read the books for the MasterMind Library.
This not by me. Hot Wheels.
Yeah, you could read with Daddy next time. So hopefully soon. Because you already know your ABCs. You want to tell everybody your ABCs real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, tell me your ABCs.
A, D, C. Good job.
Very, very good. Good job. All right, so let's say them together. A, B,
D,
C,
D,
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 E,
E,
F,
F,
G,
D,
H,
H,
I, J,
J,
K,
K,
L,
L,
M,
M,
N,
N,
O,
O.
P,
Good job.
P,
P
P
P
Q
Q
R
R
S
S
T
T
U
U
V
V
W
W
X
X
Y
Y
Z.
T.
Good job, man.
Good
High
job.
five. Ooh, gotta give you a big high five. Yeah, Trey got his ABCs. Good job, Trey.
You stop, Daddy.
Whoa, that was a good throw. All right, so that is gonna conclude our episode. On our next episode, we're coming back with chapter 1 of Jekyll Island. Listen, y'all be safe, y'all will be good, and expose your gift.